Okay, so let's talk about international trade. As you know, trade is between two individuals. Yeah, two individuals. That's trade. I can trade you this for that. That's trade. Okay. I I can sell you a product. That's a form of trade. That's the basics of trade. But from an international perspective, it's when we have more than one country engaged in the buying and selling of products to other countries. That's international trade. It's a fun topic. Okay, international trade. We're going to talk about importing and exporting. We're going to talk about uh, harm and gains and losses from trade. And of course, we'll talk about a little bit about policy, and we'll talk about some barriers to trade. So a long time ago, a couple of weeks ago, we had a conversation about this thing called a comparative advantage. Remember what that is? Comparative advantage. Remember that conversation? I know it was a long time ago. Seems like a long time ago. It was a couple of weeks ago. A country has a comparative advantage when the country produces a good at a lower opportunity cost than the other countries. The example was between computers and wheat. You remember that example? Long time ago, right? I know. Japan, the United States, computers, and wheat. That was the example we talked about back in chapter 3. And we know that Japan can produce computers at a lower opportunity cost than the United States. The United States can produce more wheat at a lower opportunity cost than Japan. Yes. So the United States has comparative advantage for wheat. Japan has comparative advantage for computers. Countries can gain from trade if the exports of the goods in which the country has comparative advantage. Japan can gain from trade when they export more computers. The United States can gain from trade when they export wheat. We know that we can have equilibrium without trade as well. Equilibrium, as you know, is the point where supply equals demand. This can happen domestically with buyers and sellers when the price and the quantity demanded are at a point where the supply equals demand. And this can be done on a domestic marketplace. So, for example, if the wheat being produced in the United States is being consumed only in the United States, the supply for wheat and the demand for wheat, when they equal, we have equilibrium. And of course, this can benefit both consumers and producers through surplus. Now, from an international perspective, when we're buying and selling wheat and computers and whatever else from one country to another, the price is designated as what we call the world price, the international price. It is called the world price of a good. So, for example, wheat is traded on the New York Stock Exchange as a commodity. Wheat is traded on the New York Stock Exchange as a commodity. What that means is I can sell a ton of wheat on the World Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, and I can sell a ton of wheat at whatever the commodity price is on the open marketplace. That's what we call the world price, PW. I can also I can also sell a ton of wheat domestically without international trade. A ton of wheat, I can sell it in the United States, produced in the United States domestically without trade. This price of demand, at demand, PD. If the domestic price is less than the world price, the country will export the good. Okay. For example, if a ton of wheat costs $50 to consume domestically, and it costs $100 to consume globally, the price set by the exchange, world price, then I will export the wheat because I have comparative advantage. If the price of wheat at the time is greater domestically than it is at the world price, I'll import more wheat. I do not have comparative advantage at that point. Smaller economies are getting into the world markets, as I'm sure that you've noticed. And when this happens, prices become more competitive. Okay? Small economies are price takers in the world market. There's typically no effect on the world price because there's usually one country that has a competitive advantage over others. However, when a small economy engages in free trade, the world price becomes relevant when there are no sellers that would accept a price less than the world price, or there'd be no buyers willing to pay more than the world price. Another example is soybeans. Soybeans, a lot of countries in Asia, excellent growers at soybeans. The United States, very good growers at soybeans. And so here in the United States, we produce soybeans. If I sell soybeans domestically, I can sell them at $4 per ton at a quantity of 500 tons. That it would be my point of equilibrium. If I want to sell my soybeans on the world market, the New York Stock Exchange has the world market of soybeans set at $6 per ton. I can locally consume 300 tons. I can produce 750 tons. I can consume locally 300 tons at $6 per ton. The remaining balance, export it. So I'll export 750 tons. I'll export 450 tons. 750 produced minus the 300 locally consumed. I'll export that difference, the surplus, yes? Without trade, my consumer surplus are areas A and B. And my producer surplus is all of area C. We learned about surpluses a while ago. The total surplus, of course, is consumer surplus plus producer surplus. With trade, my consumer surplus area is A. My producer surplus are areas B, C, and D. Area D is what we would ultimately export, right? And when we export, we recognize that export as a gain from trade. I'm gaining the additional revenue from exporting the good. Televisions in Japan, if I can produce my price demand $3,000, I can produce a quantity of 400. That's my point of equilibrium. In the world market, if the world price is $1,500, that means I would import more TVs than I would export because it would be cheaper for us to import them than to make them domestically for 3,000. Yeah. And to find how many TVs I would import, I would take my world demand of 600 units minus the world supply of 200. So I would need to import 400 to make up the difference, right? Without trade, I have a consumer surplus in area A. My producer surplus would be areas B and C. With giving a total surplus of A, B, and C. With trade, my consumer surplus would be A, B, and D. Now, the reason why this would be considered to be a consumer surplus is, of course, because I'm importing more TVs. Yeah? My producer surplus would be area C, which is very small. So the total surplus would be A, B, C, and D. The gain from the trade is, of course, going to be the area D, the imports. It's a gain from trade because we're importing more units. So the effects from trade, this just kind of summarizes what we had just talked about. So when the local price demanded is less than the world price, we see more exports, a reduction in the consumer surplus, an increase in the producer surplus, and an increase in the total surplus. When the local price demanded is greater than the world price, we see more imports, consumer surplus increases, the producer surplus goes down, and the total surplus increases. Yeah, imports and exports, they create winners and losers, of course. But ultimately, the gains can exceed the losses in most situations. So who wins from international trade? Consumers, because we have more available goods on the marketplace. Example, you go to Walmart, you'll see a wide range of products, most of them made in places like China, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Bangladesh, you name it, right? You see products from all over the world. So that benefits you, the consumer, because it gives you a variety of available goods. It also benefit producers, and it depends on who's selling it, right? At lower cost, gives economies of preference, right? So we have increased competition when we have international trade, reduces market power from domestic firms. So if I make a toy here in the United States, it's going to cost me more because I have higher labor costs. If I produce it in Bangladesh, I'll have lower labor costs. So it increases competition between the United States and Bangladesh, for example. We have an enhanced flow of ideas from international trade, right? We can exchange ideas and philosophies and technological advances, and we see that spread throughout the world as a result of international trade. Some people don't like international trade. And the reason why they might not like it is because it reduces labor costs or labor concentration, especially among those within labor unions. So, for example, I can make a vehicle in Canada or Mexico or United States. Those who lose in the United States are the labor unions, right? Because they won't be able to make as many vehicles. But ultimately, individuals gain over time because there are ultimate benefits from the trade. One thing that we've talked about in the past is called a tariff. A tariff is a form of a tax that is placed on products that are bought and sold cross borders. Free trade is where the domestic price equals the world price. Uh, and sometimes we have tariffs on imports where the tax gets paid on everything that gets imported into the country. One way to look at trade, of course, is through another commodity, one of those being cotton, for the production of cotton shirts. So the world price for a cotton shirt is $20. At $20, we can produce 80 cotton shirts. The sellers are willing to supply 25 of them at that price, which means that we'll have to import an additional 55 shirts to make up the difference. If a tariff is placed on that shirt, it will raise the of $10 per shirt. It will increase the price to $30. When that happens, my new demand will be 70. Remember, when taxes go up, the quantity comes down for demand. Yep. That will also increase the supply to $40, which reduces the amount I'm going to import to 30. That's the effect of tariffs. Yeah. With free trade, I have a consumer surplus in areas A, B, C, D, E, and F, and a producer surplus of area G, giving me a total surplus of A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. But when there's tariffs involved, taxes, my consumer surplus is areas A and B. Producer surplus is areas C and G. And the tax revenue is area E, giving me a total surplus of A, B, C, E, and G. D and F are deadweight loss. That's the reduction, right, in the quantities. Some countries will place what we call import quotas. This happened in the United States back in the 1990s and 1980s with Japanese automobiles. The United States placed what's called an import quota. It's a limit on the number of imports. And the way it worked was the United States said, hey, we need to put a limit on our vehicle imports in order to protect the welfare of the American automobile manufacturers. What this does is it limits the amount of foreign goods coming into the market in order for the local market to produce the goods ourselves, right? And to sell them at a higher price point. It's good for the local economy to have import quotas because it protects the domestic market, but it's not so good because it also means that the local consumers will pay more for those products. So one of the big arguments, of course, is with jobs. The reason why sometimes people might be against trade is because they're afraid that their job might get outsourced to another country and they'll be replaced. That was probably true back in 2018. Now in 2022, probably not true anymore because now we have more jobs than we have people. But we can see the relationship between the unemployment rate and the percentage of imports of gross domestic product. Another argument is about national security. One of the reasons why people might be afraid of having a lot of international trade is for national security reasons. You know, giving away trade secrets to foreign national governments, for example, is a huge risk. You know, and it could cause disruptions during wartime. Another reason why people might be afraid of international trade is what we call the infant industry market. When we have a brand new industry, for example, microprocessor development plants, that's a new industry for the United States. And because it's so new, we want to limit the amount of imports because we need to protect that market. Unfair competition. This goes back to my earlier example when I talked about the import quota on Japanese auto manufacturers. Well, the reason why that quota existed is to protect the domestic auto manufacturers, to create what they called a fair, competitive marketplace for automobiles. So that's why that existed. Uh, a bargaining chip. Sometimes this never works, but sometimes like the reason why we might restrict international trade is to negotiate in the future, especially when it comes to prices. But it's important that the legislature, Congress, works with the manufacturers when it comes to international trade on making policy. So the World Trade Organization is an organization that was formed around the 19th century that really helped to foster and encourage global trade. Another one you might be familiar with is the North American Free Trade Agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada that reduces restrictions on trade between the three countries and also limits any type of tariffs between the three countries. And that's the United States, Mexico, and Canada. That's called the North American Free Trade Agreement. There's another one called the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, limits tariffs and trade across countries. And of course, there's a lot of good, uh, there's good and bad, right, with international trade. Some restrictions can be placed across the United States. At the same time, there's a lot of advantages to international trade. So overall, I think it's a good thing. Trade typically increases competition, reduces prices, etc. So that's why international trade is such an important thing. Okay, uh, comments, questions, concerns, international trade.
No,
Cool.
but pretty much understandable.
It's straightforward, yeah. It's one of my favorite topics, not only because it's straightforward, but you know, it's it really does have its advantages for everyone across the globe as a global society. It
Yeah.
reduces prices, increases competition, so they're overall very good things. Cool. Uh, okay, so before I let you all go for the evening, of course, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate all of you. Uh, Chapter 8 quiz. You have two attempts, of course. The higher attempt is taken in the grade book. So Chapter 8 quiz due Sunday night. The Chapter 9 homework assignment due Sunday night. Also, if you're behind on anything, get that done. Yeah. If you missed the discussion board, wink, wink. You might have missed out on 5 points. I would encourage you to do it. Okay. Uh, if you are not satisfied with certain grades on quizzes or homework assignments, please make sure you take that second attempt. I want to see you all do well in this course. It's important to me, okay, that you do well. You all are very important to me. You're the reason why I'm here, all right? You're the reason why I teach, yeah? Uh, I want to see you all do very well. So please, I strongly encourage you to Take your time, complete the work. Of course, don't miss anything, and make sure you do those 2 attempts on everything, because really, it can only help. Uh, Also, if you need extra help, you can set up your office hours using that link right there, and I'll help you out. Also, you know, just take advantage of everything we have to offer. It's really important to me that you do well. So I want to make sure that you have all the resources to do well. Any other comments, questions, or concerns before we call it a night?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Anthony. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Appreciate all of you. If you ever need anything, you can email me, call me, set up office hours. Whatever you need, I'm here for you 100% of the time. I look forward to your submissions for chapters 8 and 9 by Sunday night. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Do the right things. I'll see you all again next Monday. Take care, y'all. Bye bye.